So I'm continuing our month-long podcast series on the dismissive avoidant wife. And what I want to do is step back just for a moment and explain what is it exactly about a dismissive avoidant wife that makes things so challenging in your marriage. So welcome back to the Secure Husband Podcast. Bruce Abbott, certified professional coach and founder of SecureHusband.com. If you're listening to this episode, I'm going to assume that you are probably the anxious, preoccupied husband living with a dismissive avoidant wife. Now, how can I be so sure about this? My guess is that you're living inside of a marriage that makes absolutely no sense to you, because the dismissive avoidant wife defies all logic of everything that we hear as husbands that supposedly wives want. Closeness, affection, gifts of love, all of these things that the media, society tells us women want. And we provide these things, and it draws your wife further away from you. The dismissive avoidant wife plays with your mind because it makes no sense. And it's why, as a husband, you've spent years trying so hard, and all you end up with is distance. Let's look at this from just an overview perspective of the dismissive avoidant wife. Just like anxious, preoccupied men have childhood wounds where we tried to earn affection and love from our caregivers, and that love was very inconsistent. The phrase is intermittent reinforcement. Sometimes your emotional needs were met as a child, and sometimes they weren't. The dismissive avoidant wife also is coming to the relationship with childhood wounds, where in this particular situation, the dynamics of her childhood made her feel like she needed to pull back instead of the anxious, preoccupied trying to run towards and see me, look at me. The dismissive avoidant, the childhood wound from that, is backing up. I need independence. I need space. And I've talked about this many times on the podcast. But being aware of it and actually doing something about that in your marriage is the tough part. So you can be aware. We always talk about that with the Secure Husband process. The first step is awareness. Understanding this gives you at least a background to understand the behaviors to where you can see them, you can see the patterns, but it still makes you feel powerless. It's because it defies logic. And when intimacy, when you coming towards her, is the trigger, then no amount of awareness can override that nervous system that feels unsafe. Let me explain that a little better. What a dismissive avoidant woman is protecting is they're protecting their independence. So they are protecting themselves from feeling vulnerable. So they're avoiding vulnerability. They're avoiding dependence. They're avoiding emotional exposure, expectation, the possibility of being seen and found lacking, because at the core of dismissive avoidance is defectiveness, shame. Dismissive avoidants have a severe sense of defectiveness. The anxious, preoccupied man is just the opposite, because what he feels that he can do is, if I try harder, I will finally reach this pinnacle of whatever. Do, work harder, fix, try harder. The dismissive avoidant woman is completely just the opposite. There is nothing I can do. I am defective. That's the inner wound that she has. That's that deep unconscious belief that if you really see her, you'll see that she's not enough. That's at the core. So she adapts. So she learns how to downplay emotions. She learns how to rely on herself. That adaptation in the dating and infatuation phase looks like strength and independence. On the outside, that's what you're seeing. She's capable, she's responsible, she's high functioning. Internally, that's a deep cost that she's feeling. Suppressing emotions is painful. It causes that disconnect. And this is why you see the sexual shutdown. It's that emotional suppression. I think one of the biggest challenges to an anxious, preoccupied husband dealing with a dismissive wife is, see, for women, sexuality and emotional availability, they are linked together in the brain. And when a dismissive avoidant woman suppresses her emotional world, her sexuality gets suppressed as well. She's not doing this intentional. She's not doing it intentionally to punish you or reject you. She's not trying to manipulate you, or at least in most cases, but it's a byproduct of dissociation. See, sex requires presence. Presence, that requires feeling. That requires emotion. Feeling requires safety. And we talk about emotional safety, but this takes it to a whole nother level, because this is a deeper level of protection and intimacy, especially with a partner like your husband, where there's a tremendous amount of responsibility because of the marriage. It activates a fear of emotional responsibility, a fear of being needed. So her body shuts down. That's why the dismissive avoidant can completely shut down sexually. They were having sex all the time. Well, that's because she's in that infatuation stage where oxytocin, dopamine, all of that stuff is flooding her body. She's feeling present in her body. And so she's feeling some of those emotions. She's feeling infatuation. She's feeling love. But over time, that will return back to its status quo. And it's usually, I've heard anywhere from 6 months to even 2 years. But somewhere in that phase, the dismissive avoidant woman will return back to equilibrium, and she'll return to that sexual shutdown. And that shutdown, it's not just sex. I mean, it's everything. It's a shutdown of all emotions. It's a shutdown of warmth. It's a shutdown of happiness. It's a shutdown, not only just sex, but it's everything. It's a shutdown of her entire emotional feeling. And then here comes the anxious, preoccupied man who's trying. This is so painful. This is the worst part of the APDA, anxious, preoccupied, dismissive, avoidant, APDA trap, is you're thinking, I'm offering connection. I'm just asking for connection. That's all I'm asking for. And her nervous system hears, me, dismissive, avoidant woman, must be failing. Because, remember, there's an intense amount of shame. There's a tremendous amount of self-defectiveness. And that's why dismissives are so defensive, almost to the point where they're stubborn. But they are so defensive because their guard is coming from this place of defectiveness. And that's why dismissive avoidant women are extremely sensitive to perceived criticism. Even if you're not intending to, just the slightest little bit triggers them. So any expression of need becomes evidence to her that she's not enough, that she's being evaluated, that she's doing something wrong, and so instead of leaning in, she's going to pull away. And it's not because she doesn't love you. That distance is how she self-regulates. This is all subconscious. It's all happening at the nervous system level. And from there, that's where the deactivation happens. That's like her escape mechanism. When a dismissive avoidant woman feels overwhelmed by intimacy, it's not a conscious manipulation, and it's not meant to reject you, but her brain just moves into that deactivation. It's a survival reflex. And that's where you see the emotional numbing. The flaw finding, that's why you see so many dismissives, they're very critical of their partner because it takes the attention off. I'm taking the attention off of me and my defectiveness, and I'm putting it on you. That's where you start to get withdrawal and coldness and irritation. And her brain is now scanning for reasons to justify distance. Remember, this is all happening on the somatic feeling level, subconscious. So that's where she starts coming up with these thoughts of, this relationship is draining. I just don't feel anything for you anymore. And if you are the anxious preoccupied that becomes triggered and you start really, really going even stronger towards your dismissive spouse, now it just brings in this whole new level of repulsion and disgust that she'll have. So if you're, texting her 50 times a day, stuff like that, where you're forcing that connection, that's going to really just take this whole dismissive avoidance to a whole new level. And that's where you really start to see resentment and contempt from a dismissive avoidant wife towards her partner. You have two nervous systems battling it out. One of the things that dismissive avoidant women do is they compensate by dissociation. And what I mean by that is they fixate on anything that keeps them out of their feeling. So that's why you see dismissive avoidant wives fixating on the kids, career, even hobbies or routines or fitness. It seems like everything takes priority over you. And that's not a coincidence. Most of the time you see it like with kids and career. Kids, it's powerful because you can justify that. Because who doesn't want to be a good mom? And if you even dare try to challenge that, the argument is so powerful back. Well, I'm just trying to be a good mother. You're just too much. Kids are especially powerful because they provide purpose without any vulnerability. There's that connection, but there's not the emotional exposure that comes with sex. Of course, there's justification there. You want to be a good mom. They wrap so much into children or their careers and then come back, I'm exhausted. I've got nothing left for you. I gave everything. I work hard all day. I gave everything to the kids, gave everything to my job. There is some truth to that, but they are also a function to avoid intimacy. The dismissive avoidant wife will find anything to dive into to distance. Do you see how this defies everything that we've always thought we should be doing for our wives? It's why chasing them makes everything worse. The anxious, preoccupied pattern just collides with dismissive avoidance. Because the more distant she becomes, the more anxious you feel. The more anxious you feel, the more you explain and reassure and try harder. You take things off her plate because that's what you hear. Well, she's so tired. She's got so much to do. She's got so much. You could take every single solitary task off of her plate, and there will still be some reason that she's emotionally unavailable. And then you start to lower your own needs. One of the saddest things is when I start to hear from some of my guys where they're like, what can I do to lower my sex drive to where I don't have a libido anymore? That is self-abandonment. But when you do these things as the anxious preoccupied, she experiences as, emotional demand and obligation. She feels this loss of autonomy, which deepens her withdrawal even more. And you get the APDA trap. And then all of a sudden, you start to think about this. And this is where the awareness comes in. You realize at some point, as a husband, okay, I am now carrying the household. You find yourself doing all the chores, all the tasks. You're the one doing everything. You find yourself the ones carrying, the kids. You're the one that's making the lunches. You're the one that's taking them to school. You're the one who's helping with the homework. You're carrying the emotional weight. You're the one that's like, if any sex is happening, you're the one initiating it. If there's any affection, you're the one initiating it. If there's any connection, you are the one carrying that responsibility. You're carrying that relationship. You are carrying all of these things and receiving nothing back. Nothing. It's not because you're weak. It's not because you're too much. But your attachment system is trying to restore connection at any cost. And in that, you are self-abandoning. Yes, you have a role in parenting. Yes, you have a role in helping your kids. Yes, you have a role in the relationship. But you do not have to carry 100% of it. Overfunctioning. The overfunctioning is self-abandonment. And the worst part of it is it doesn't inspire desire in her at all. It totally erodes polarity. It erodes respect. It erodes self-trust. It's pure self-abandonment. And you know what the hard part of all this is? The traditional solution is couples counseling, marriage counseling, couples therapy. Dismissive avoidant women don't do well in this because what happens is in these therapy sessions, she's required to provide vulnerability on demand. And therapy forces her to frame needs as problems. And this invites that emotional exposure, and she feels like it's criticism or attack. Remember, defensiveness, almost stubbornness. So what happens in couples counseling? A lot of times a dismissive avoidant woman will just shut down and oftentimes leaves couples, sessions thinking, this is a waste of my time. This is not working for me. And the husband ends up leaving, I feel now really alone. What do you do? Everything that you've been taught that women supposedly want. Not the dismissive avoidant. What do you do? Couples counseling? A dismissive doesn't thrive in couples counseling. What? Well, first is understanding all of this. Understanding and being aware of the different wounds that are going on. Understanding how your nervous system is triggered. Understanding how her nervous system is triggered. And then understanding that you have to be able to move from awareness to action. So as we talk about the secure husband process, we take awareness, and then from that point, again, a lot of this is inner work too, inner child work, divine guidance. And from there, we learn from our divine guidance how to take loving action. And a lot of this is going to be a lot of self-work. But it is not self-work trying harder to please your wife. It is the self-work that you put forth lovingly to yourself. Because here's the thing about the nervous system. When it gets triggered, it's like muscle memory. And the only way to really power through all of this is when you start to make the internal changes to you. And that's what the secure husband process is all about. Because real change requires nervous system regulation, internal leadership. And it's got to be something that you can easily do and repeat. We focus on some very simple things in the secure husband process. Nervous system, soothing our nervous system, doing the inner child work, connecting to divine guidance and wisdom to be able to take loving action, whatever that loving action is, establishing boundaries, regulating your nervous system. It's not talking more about it and explaining it and pursuing more. It's the things that you can control, and a lot of it is self-work. And then that's where the shift in power starts to happen. Because you're not going to make her feel safe. You're not going to make her vulnerable. You're not going to make her desire intimacy. You're certainly not going to make her open up emotionally. But you can stop self-abandoning. You can regulate your own nervous system and stop chasing and reclaim your emotional leadership. Now, it's a form of detachment. Notice I didn't say sulk, withdrawal. No, it's not being cold. It's self-respect without resentment. And that takes a lot of work because eventually that clarity will be there. And you're able to notice, okay, I see what's happening now. And I'm able to sit with it and just sit with the discomfort. And then just ask yourself, am I willing to keep self-abandoning to preserve this relationship? It's not saying you leave. It's not saying that you stay. It's just you're seeing reality and what it is without denial. And from there, you're able to make those changes. And in many situations, that dismissive wife now starts to feel less pressure, starts to feel less like you're just pursuing. And in many instances, she starts to feel a little bit more regulated, and she's able to meet you closer. And in some cases, things don't get better, and you set the boundaries, and the relationship comes to an end. But no relationship is going to heal if you've got one person just starving. And no one should be in a relationship where they are starving. It's going to be up to you to put in the self-work, to establish the boundaries of this is what is acceptable in this relationship to me. And if this person refuses to meet you halfway, well, then you've got some tough decisions to make. Hopefully that cleared up more about the dismissive avoidant wife. I know it can be frustrating being in a relationship with the DA. You've got confusion, sadness, loneliness, grief, anger. All of these things are part of this attachment dynamic. And it's an attachment dynamic that's hard to get your needs met in. I'm going to dive deeper into some of the topics today and some other ones over this next month as we talk about the dismissive avoidant and what we can do for ourselves, loving self-compassion, what we can do to thrive in this type of relationship. So hopefully you enjoy this month-long series. I find this fascinating. It was probably some of the most insightful information that I came across when my wife and I were going through our healing process here and through our journey. So if this podcast episode has been helpful for you and you're not already subscribing, would you hit that subscribe button? Would you share this episode if you've got a friend or someone you know who's struggling with this? And maybe you need accountability. You have the awareness, but how do I put it into action? How do I go from noticing how my wife is to actually being able to move the needle? If you need accountability, reach out to me. SecureHusband.com. Fill out that form for a free 30-minute consultation and see if one-on-one coaching is right for you. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Secure Husband podcast. Thanks for listening.